Hi, everyone. I'm Bené Wilson. I am on the board of the World Airliner Historical Society, and we are doing our monthly webinar. And I'm very excited because, Airliners is coming up very soon. And we have a very special guest today. We have Judy Gerling. She is on the TWA Museum Board of Directors. And we have her here because we're hoping that you all will consider going to the museum while you're in Kansas City. I know that I will be there. So, Judy, thank you so much for being on, and I look forward to our conversation.
Well, thank you for inviting me. And we are looking forward to seeing you all in Kansas City, showing off our museum and our city. We really appreciate you all coming.
Thank you. So we'll just get right into the questions. My first question is, I'm a big fan of airline museums. I worked at Delta Airlines, and one of my fun jobs was volunteering at their museum, the Pan Am Museum, the Northwest Airlines Museum. How did the TWA Museum come into existence?
It started in the early 80s when one of our mechanics at our overhaul base bought a box of what he called junk. But in that box, he discovered a very rare transcontinental and Western Air Express pin. And he was so excited, he showed it to his friends at the overhaul base, and the mechanics built him a case, and employees started bringing him donations. So that's where it started. Then we had different areas where we had other items at our administrative center across the highway from the overhaul base and at our employees credit union. And once Carl Icahn took over, it was felt better to remove all of the museum things to a different location. So with the help of the Platte County Museum, we moved to a convention center up by the MCI airport. And finally, in 2012, everything was moved to the building we are in now, 10 Richards Road, where we attained our 501c3 certification. And then from then on, our story expanded.
So it just started off as a simple labor of love.
Indeed, that's how it began, with a box of stuff bought at a garage sale.
So, Judy, you kind of alluded to it a little, but can you tell me why you all felt it was important to create this museum for TWA?
Um, we played a major role in the development of the U.S. airline system and in the history of Kansas City as we grew with the city of Kansas City. Uh, we had a pioneering spirit, which is, of course, very well known in the Midwest, the pioneering spirit, and our contributions to aviation history are enormous. I have pages and pages of firsts that TWA contributed, not just to commercial aviation, but to aviation in general. So from the birth of airmail to the inception of passenger air travel to the post-World War II era of global route expansion, we led the way for 75 years, and we wanted to continue to show our community and the world what our history has done to help aviation.
Perfect segue into my next question, because I said, as you were saying, TWA did play a pivotal role in aviation history. So, can you talk to me a little about how the museum highlights TWA's contributions to commercial air travel?
The flow of the tour of the museum is based on the history of the airline from its start with the help of Charles Lindbergh and the many innovations originated by TWA through the various things in passenger service, technical services, in aircraft systems. And that's how the flow of the museum goes. And it shows how all of the innovations we had and all of the artifacts that went with that.
Okay. And we were talking about you mentioned Carl Icahn toward the beginning, but Howard Hughes also famously owned TWA for a while. And I wanted to ask you if you could share how that's reflected in the museum.
Howard Hughes was a very, very important part in aviation in general. He was passionate about aviation, and we were fortunate to have him take an interest in us and at a time when we were looking for money to buy new airplanes. And one of our owners, one of our first presidents, visited with him and was asking for money to help buy new airplanes. And Howard Hughes was so interested, he said he wanted to buy the airplane. So through Howard Hughes, we did so much in aviation. We even had an airplane, which we have at our museum, the Lockheed Electra, that was used primarily for science and technology. It did not take passengers. And through that, we got all of our firsts in aviation through Howard Hughes because he was so passionate about flying and improving safety, speed, altitude, aircraft.
So I'm sorry, I'm going to go a little off script here. The Lockheed, can you talk about that? I have never heard of this. And you said it did not fly passengers. So what exactly did it do?
It did research. That's all it was used for. Well, it flew the VIPs around.
Right.
Howard Hughes would be doing that. But and you do know that Howard was so involved in flying, and so many first coast to coast altitude, pressurization, things like that, that he was involved with. And it was through this little plane, Lockheed Electra, that they did a lot of their work. We have a little board there by the plane that explains a lot about it. But one of the interesting things is that when we bought that airplane, it cost $39,000.
Ooh, okay.
Then over the years, the airplane disappeared. And Helen Richter, who was the daughter of one of our first presidents, found the airplane, restored it, and she is a pilot. She took it to lots of air shows around the country. And then finally, the time came when it was time to let go of her flying. And so she said it was time for the museum to take care of it. So it came to Kansas City about 3 years ago. And it is a static display, but we keep it in very good condition. And we are very proud to have that plane that was used for science and technology with Howard Hughes and all of the other pilots and managers of that era.
Judy, you have to tell me, how did she find the plane?
I don't know that, but that's a very good question. I will find that out and see if it's ready for you when you all come to the museum.
Okay, that's great. So, besides that Lockheed Electra, are there any other artifacts that are specific to Howard Hughes that are at the museum? And if they are, what are they?
We have that. I showed you all these pages that we have a first that Howard Hughes was involved with.
Mhm.
We don't have much. We have a few papers and a few things like that. We also have the furniture that was in his office at our airport downtown. And so it's not up to date, but it was his furniture. And so we continue to look for artifacts from his era because he was such an important part of our march in history.
So then I wanted to ask then, if people out there who are watching this, they want to donate any artifacts, not just from that era,
Yeah.
what are you, how do you do that? How do you accept artifacts? And what is it that you're looking for the museum?
We are interested in anything to do with the history of TWA, even personal things that are part of TWA. We are so pleased that anybody wants to donate their prized personal artifacts that mean so much to them to let us share with the world. So we are willing to accept donations. They can call and let us know they're coming or tell us what they have. And we are glad to accept them. And because we are a 501c3, this is also a tax deductible donation for the donor.
Okay. So, Judy, I'm really looking forward to coming to the museum. So, what do you think are some of the must-see exhibits at the museum that I would enjoy?
I have to say, to miss or skip anything is going to be a loss because they just seem to go from one thing to the next. But the most significant parts of the tour really are the personal stories that our volunteer guides tell as they are describing the artifacts that our visitors are looking at. And we hear so often after our visitors have finished the tour, they loved it and they especially loved the personal stories. So that really brings these artifacts to life for them. And so that's the important thing. But now we have the founders room, which has the desk of our very first president, Jack Fry. And it went many places in this country before we finally got it back. And so we're glad to have that. The in-flight passenger service galley presents a mock-up of the best in airline service, first class. And the training boards and procedures trainers are the greatest things for the passengers to see in training that they would never see anyplace else, because they get on an airplane and the pilots are flying the airplane, whereas we show them what the pilots have to go through before they can get on an airplane. And because our training was so wonderful, we're so glad to be able to say that Air Force One used our pilot and flight training for many years.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, behind the scenes, I know you're not allowed to put everything out, but can you talk about some of the archival documents, rare photos, or anything that you have at the museum?
We have thousands and thousands of documents, books, artifacts, photographs that are kept in our library. We have a fabulous library. I haven't seen most of them. And anybody that wants to do research needs to be interviewed and make an appointment to come in, because these are so rare and they are so fragile that we want to keep very good care of them. Some of our rare things are on display. One of the one of the nicest thing is a airworthiness certificate signed by Orville Wright for one of our first presidents.
Oh, love
So
that.
those are the kinds of things that we don't have much of the very rare things out. They come out for certain events, but because they are so fragile and so rare, we don't have a lot of them out. But what we do have out is in glassed cases, archival glass cases.
Okay. So, I asked this a little earlier, but as far as donations go, what exactly are people donating these days?
Well, of course, they donate uniforms, and I'm always glad, especially to have the older uniforms. We have one of the first uniforms, and that's it. And so we are looking for that. Um, but now they're donating a lot of manuals and personal items. They come up with a lot of our china that we served in first class that they bought at stores or somehow obtained them. So we get the china and crystal and flatware. Menus, we've gotten some very good items from our papal charters, which we did all of John Paul II's papal charters in the United States, which is a gift for us.
I love that. I wanted to ask, did the museum have do any work with American Airlines when they started unveiling the heritage liveries?
The museum did not.
Okay.
No, we
All right.
were not asked to be involved in that,
Okay.
but I'm glad they did it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are, not just for TWA, but all, the other
Well,
airlines
yes,
that were
yes.
included too.
There are a number of different liveries of different airlines that were once separate and now part of the airline aviator American family.
I wanted to ask you, museums, they're specialized. It takes a lot to keep documents, keep track of them, to keep them preserved. What is it that you all do? And I know that can't be it's probably an expensive endeavor. So what do you do to make sure that, everything is archived correctly and in the right temperature and all of that?
We have a wonderful archivist, and in addition to that, she has a staff of curating specialists, and they work very hard to keep all of the very rare items in private closed cases, closed rooms that we control the temperature. We're very careful about displaying things because we know that they can be harmed by not being displayed properly. So we try to be very careful about that. And let's see, as I said, only some of these very special things are only displayed or only come out for a certain event, and they are handled white glove.
Okay. And speaking of special events, I wanted to ask you, everybody knows about the Pan Am experience.
Yeah.
And I hear that TWA Museum has one too, which my friend Henry and I are going to attend. So can you tell people about that?
It is the most wonderful experience. It's heartwarming, and it's so much memory for those of us that did that service on the airplane. But what we do is we give, when they decide to come, we give them a boarding pass that looks like the boarding pass from years past when we were using boarding passes, regular nice boarding passes with seat assignments. And then the guests are taken into our ambassador club. And you know, all the airlines had major clubs at major airports. And so the name of ours was the Ambassador Club. So our guests go into the Ambassador Club where they are served cocktails and hors d'oeuvres. And they also have a chance to see our fabulous uniform collection. We do a little fashion show with our uniforms. And they have questions, they really enjoy it. And then if somebody's wearing the 1936 uniform, oftentimes someone will say, "Was that your uniform?" Well, not
No.
exactly. But they're so interested. So once we've finished that section, then we take them down our little make-believe jetway to our cabin trainer, which is a combination 707, 727 cabin trainer. And from there, then they take their seats and they are served the 5-course meal that we served on our first class long haul flights. And we're thinking about Chateaubriand, filet mignon, rack of lamb, things like that we served on our menus back then. And the flight attendants are in their full serving uniform to offer this service. And our service is offered on a linen-lined aisle serving cart that each course goes out in this cart in the aisle, and we serve each passenger individually from this aisle serving cart. And it ends with we have all fine wines to go with our different entrees and different courses. And the serveware that we use is Rosenthal china, Swedish crystal, silver plate flatware. And it's just beautiful to see it. It's a wonderful experience for them. They come out saying how much they enjoyed it and how much it brought back memories, or we're glad to see what we used to do from the golden age of flying.
Okay. Now, you started your career at TWA in 1965. Can you talk about how you got there, what the experience was like, and you're still around now with the museum?
I like to tell people I started when I was 12. And they sometimes say, "You did?" Um, I was attending University of Minnesota at Duluth, and my sorority sister wanted to go to Minneapolis to interview for a job as a hostess with TWA, but she didn't want to go by herself. So I
Ah,
said, "Okay, I'll go with you. I can have the day off." So we went there, and I got hired, and she didn't. I know. We weren't real good friends after that.
ah.
But that's how I got started. I came to Kansas City. I was going to try to be based in Chicago, closer to home, but nope, Kansas City is where I was based and where I stayed until they moved us all to St. Louis.
So, what was the first plane that you were on, and what was it like back then?
My first flight was on a Convair 880. That was the pilot's dream because it was such a speedy plane.
Mhm.
Uh, for me, I thought, I'm just glad I could get here. And my first flight was from Kansas City to San Francisco. It was very exciting. I had a training supervisor with me, and I felt very quickly that I made a good decision to take this job that I was offered. It was a gift, that my career was a gift.
And how long were you at TWA?
for 23 years. I retired. I took early retirement in 1989. My husband and I, and he was a pilot, had 4 children, and we decided maybe it was time for one of us to stay home.
So, what were some of the planes besides the Constellation that which you were on, that
I,
you worked on?
I did fly the Connie twice before it was retired. After that, every aircraft that TWA had, I flew. I worked on. My last flight was from London to St. Louis on a 747.
My favorite airplane.
I loved working that one too. I liked all of them. The DC-9 was a little difficult because back then we were always serving liquor and dinner. And I remember having to serve liquor and dinner in 56 minutes, saying, "Are you
Ooh,
done
that's quick.
yet?"
So, are there any other exciting development or expansion or any changes on the horizon for the museum?
Well, we are out of room. We have been so fortunate to receive and continue to receive, and we want to continue to receive things from people. So it's time for us to be looking for expanding our space in some way or another. Um, we're limited at the moment, but we're keeping our eye open. We have several people working with us to figure out what we can do to expand. And in our future, we want to have expanded displays in our history of aviation, especially all the firsts that we did. We want to highlight Charles Lindbergh and Howard Hughes more. We'd like to have a Hall of Fame area of sorts, which would highlight the major awards that TWA won and that employees won as personal award endeavors. And there are just so many. Oh, there's many other airline TWA employee groups that we want to do more of. We just are finishing up a ground staff section of all of the things that the ground staff people did and their uniforms. And we want to also talk about the fact that we maintain the services at NASA, the Space Center at Cape Canaveral. And we operated several of the National Park Services, and then we had PARS and WorldSpan groups. And these are employee groups that we want to show their history. And we also acquired Ozark. We do have a small area for Ozark, but they are part of our history family. And so we are looking for artifacts for them. So these are all areas, what it takes to get an airplane off the ground. And we want to honor all of them.
I love hearing that. And one of the things I love about the Delta Museum is it's not just Delta. They have a section for Pan Am, they have a
Yeah,
section for Northwest, they have a
yeah,
section for Northeast. I mean, so they're
yeah,
honoring, the
yes,
other airlines that made them
yes.
what they were. So
I think that's very important to include that in a museum of our sort that has so many other factors, other companies that then became part of our TWA family, and we want to showcase their history too.
So before we end, I wanted to ask if you could just kind of put out a personal invitation to those who are coming to the Airliner show. We'll be in Kansas City, of course, from June 26th through the 30th. This will be my second Airliner, so I'm very, very excited. So just tell us, give us a personal information, invitation. Tell us about coming to the museum.
Well, coming to Kansas City is an experience. The museum is a very important part of Kansas City. In fact, it is the third most important museum in town. The first one is our Nelson Museum of Art, and the second one is the World War I Museum, and we are the third. So we wouldn't want you to miss, because you are airliners. We want you to come to the Kansas City Museum. It's easy to get to, although we are building the bridge across the river, but we make everything, everybody gets here. Even people from Finland call us and say, "How do I get there?" So we are happy to have you come. We're happy to have you experience our barbecue. And I know you're going to have a wonderful evening on Friday. Under the Props is our theme for that evening. And we are looking forward to visiting with you and hoping that you will enjoy our museum and add it to something that you will share with your friends that they should come and visit with us too. And thank you so much for coming to Kansas City, for thinking of us and helping us to continue on in the future.
Thank you so much for doing this. I was excited anyway, but now I am beyond excited to come see the museum. And we'll stay in touch. I hope that I will see you there so we can actually meet in person.
I hope so too. And thank you so much for inviting me to be part of your podcast. I really have enjoyed it.
Thank you. All right, that's it. So thank you all for attending. I'll see you at Airliners.